On the early morning of August 5, 2025, the usually calm streets of Indonesia began to tremble with an uneasy tension. And it wasn't the kind of nervousness caused by politics or the economy. This was something far deeper, something that came from the very heart of the earth itself, and soon the entire world would be talking about nothing else. Every TV channel, every radio station, every news website, and every social media platform was filled with only one breaking headline: Volcano blast in Indonesia could be the biggest eruption in decades. And as people sipped their morning tea or coffee, scrolling through their phones, they couldn't escape the terrifying images and urgent words flashing on their screens. Because deep in the volcanic mountains of Java, one of the most dangerous and active volcanoes in the world, Mount Merapi, had started showing signs that it was about to unleash a disaster of unimaginable scale. The kind that could bury villages, darken the skies, and send ash clouds traveling thousands of kilometers away. The report said that scientists from the Indonesian Geological Disaster Technology Center had been monitoring the volcano for months. But in the last 48 hours, its activity had surged to alarming levels. Tremors beneath the surface had grown stronger. Hot gases were venting from new cracks in the earth, and the ground itself seemed to breathe, rising and falling as if the mountain was alive and preparing to exhale its fury. And people who lived near its base reported hearing strange, roaring sounds from deep underground, like a giant beast waking from a long sleep, which made the hair on the back of their necks stand up. Because these were the kinds of sounds their grandparents had once told them about before the deadly eruption of 2010, when Merapi's wrath had destroyed homes, farms, and lives. And now, history seemed ready to repeat itself, only this time the warning signs were even stronger. By mid-morning, helicopters were hovering over the volcano, taking aerial shots of the swelling crater, while emergency response teams were already setting up evacuation centers in schools, mosques, and stadiums far from the danger zone. Yet the roads leading out of the villages were jammed with motorcycles, trucks, and buses overloaded with people carrying whatever they could grab in a hurry, clothes stuffed into plastic bags, chickens in cages, sacks of rice, and in some heartbreaking scenes, old men and women being carried on the shoulders of younger relatives because they could not walk fast enough. Meanwhile, the international community was watching with growing concern, because if this eruption turned out to be as massive as experts feared, the ash could rise so high into the atmosphere that it might affect air travel across Southeast Asia, disrupt sunlight for weeks, and even cause changes in global weather patterns, something scientists call a volcanic winter. And so meteorological agencies from Japan to Australia were tracking satellite images every few minutes, updating their forecasts and issuing alerts to airlines. In the capital city of Jakarta, the president of Indonesia held an emergency press conference, urging calm but also stressing the seriousness of the situation, saying, "We must prepare for the worst, even as we pray for the best," and his words were carried live on every TV screen, every news app, and shared endlessly on social media, where hashtags like #PrayForIndonesia, #MERAPI Eruption, and #August2025Volcano were trending worldwide. In one particularly haunting live broadcast from a news crew stationed just 20 kilometers from the volcano, the camera captured a massive plume of steam and ash shooting hundreds of meters into the sky, while a low rumbling shook the ground beneath their feet, and the reporter's voice trembled as she described how birds were flying away in huge flocks and wild animals were seen running down from the mountains. Something locals always took as a sign that nature knew what was coming long before humans did. The fear was spreading faster than the lava ever could. People in cities hundreds of kilometers away were rushing to buy face masks, bottled water, and emergency supplies, while hotels in safer areas reported being fully booked by afternoon. and rumors began to circulate online about other volcanoes in the region, possibly waking up in response to Merope's movements. Though experts tried to calm these fears by reminding everyone that not every quake or tremor meant another eruption was coming. Still, the atmosphere was electric with dread, because everyone understood that once a volcano like Merope decided to release its power, nothing could stop it, and all humans could do was get out of its way. The eerie part was that as evening approached, the volcano seemed almost too quiet, as if it was holding its breath, and the bright orange glow from the crater that had been visible in the morning dimmed slightly, which some scientists said might mean pressure was building even more dangerously beneath the surface. And one volcanologist explained on live TV that sometimes a temporary pause like this was actually the calm before the biggest blast, the kind that could send pyroclastic flows, deadly waves of superheated gas and rock racing down the slopes at hundreds of kilometers per hour, leaving absolutely nothing alive in their path. And this warning only made the urgency greater. Rescue teams continued their work through the night, using loudspeakers to tell villagers to leave immediately. But not everyone wanted to go. Some refused to abandon their land, their animals, their entire way of life, saying they would rather die on their soil than start over somewhere else. And this heartbreaking resistance was being filmed and broadcast to the rest of the world, making people everywhere wonder what they would do in such a situation. Meanwhile, inside the control rooms of Indonesia's geological monitoring stations, dozens of experts were staring at screens filled with constantly updating seismic graphs, thermal images, and gas readings, and each new spike in activity made their voices grow more urgent, their conversations faster, because they knew they might have only hours, maybe minutes, before the mountain unleashed its fury. Far away, in countries across the ocean, ordinary people who had never even heard of Mount Merope before today were now glued to their screens, following every update as if it was happening in their own backyard, because something about the raw, unstoppable power of a volcano reminded everyone of just how small and fragile human life really is. And so, as midnight approached on that fateful day of August 5th, 2025, the world held its breath with the mountain, waiting, watching, and wondering whether the next moment would bring silence, or the deafening roar of the earth exploding. As the live footage continued to roll, the reality of the situation became even more chilling. The lava that had been quietly bubbling beneath Mount Merope's surface was now visibly creeping down its slopes, inching closer to the villages and towns that lay in its path, and residents could be seen packing hurriedly, some with tear-streaked faces, others with expressions frozen in fear and disbelief. The air was thick with ash, which fell like gray snow, coating rooftops, streets, and cars, making it hard to breathe and harder to see. Scientists monitoring the volcano appeared on multiple news channels, their faces grave as they explained that the eruption had entered a critical phase, with seismic activity at levels rarely recorded before. One volcanologist revealed that the tremors weren't just caused by rising magma. There were strange, unexplained signals beneath the surface that didn't match any previous volcanic behavior. This had many experts wondering if something else was happening underground, something possibly man-made or even unknown to science. Meanwhile, local authorities struggled to keep order as roads, jammed with evacuation traffic and communication networks, became overloaded with frantic calls. Social media was flooded with videos of glowing lava rivers, collapsing trees, and terrified animals fleeing the eruption zone. The sun, barely visible through the thick ash clouds, cast an eerie orange glow over the landscape, turning day into a dim twilight. And just when it seemed the eruption couldn't become any more dangerous, a new explosion rocked the volcano, sending a massive plume of ash miles into the sky and triggering lightning storms within the cloud. The chaos was far from over. Then, In an unexpected turn, an emergency broadcast interrupted all channels with a cryptic message. Not everything you see is natural. Prepare for truths you were never meant to know. The broadcast ended abruptly, leaving millions across the country and beyond with a chilling question. What was really happening beneath Mount Merapi? And could this eruption be just the beginning of a far greater mystery?